Can you hear me, brother?
All right, yeah.
Peace, peace.
Peace. What's going on, brother? How's it going?
It's moving and grooving, brother. Moving and grooving. How you doing?
Just met a marinating, doing my thing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's what's up. It's good to see you, brother.
For sure. Yeah, man. It's my birthday today. I turned 45. Woo!
Happy birthday. Happy birthday.
Tell you, man. It's like I tell somebody heartbeat though, I get better with age. You know, we do it.
Yes, sir. Nice, brother. Well, we definitely want to thank you for, spending your time here on your Earth Day, to go ahead and kind of dispel myths, also elevate consciousness to a higher level so that more and more brothers and sisters can experience the divine oneness on their journey, brother. Mm-hmm. So, much love, much appreciation with that.
No problem. I appreciate it. Likewise, I also appreciate the work in which you're putting into this, and as far as having our sisters and brothers join us in this journey of discovery, because that's what it's all about, discovering the best part of ourselves.
No doubt. Right.
To understand our place in the universe, our purpose, why we're here, and, where is it that we're trying to go?
No doubt. And then, also kind of us understanding that, accepting and expressing our uniqueness, but then understanding it comes in a line, a lineage, other traditions that have understood this path, how they've understood it and how they've manifested it, the commonalities, the similarities, the differences that exist on the path, and the validity of each system. Each system has there have been members of every system that have identified, touched the essence and tried to express it. It just so happens like in the West, this, because of the Roman Catholic understanding of domination and power, they've suppressed that side, and it's only the West. It's really only the Western religion that does that. Every other religion doesn't do it. I really haven't found it in any other indigenous religions. I mean, I'm not including Judaism and Islam. I'm including all those two in the West. Along with Roman Catholic Christianity. But every other indigenous kind of system of spiritual cultivation, I see it as dealing with connection of you and the divine essence. And then it's just their approach is different. The ritual is different. So I think it's good that we're having this discussion. And just support, once brothers and sisters kind of discover us and to support the channel, and grow in that level, in that discussion, and I won't say debate, but that discussion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's important for our audience to know and keep in mind that we come from a society, or at least we were born into a society that claims to be, Judeo-Christian. So the influence of Judeo-Christian type values, they're still around us, right? Yeah. Even if we have expanded beyond the doctrine of being within the church and so forth. I definitely think that anybody who has chosen to ask these questions and move outside of the church and go on their own journey, my hat goes off to them, because there's a lot of pressure to get you not to go outside of those boundaries.
No, there is.
Looking in the Black church, for instance, in which, I grew up in. At first, I was actually part of a Lutheran church. And also from time to time, I'd visit a Baptist church or a Pentecostal church. And I went to a Lutheran school, and then I went to a Catholic school, and I saw that half the times I felt like it wasn't a story about me. I felt a story about somebody else, number one. you know.
Okay.
I also found it surprising to hear my stepfather talking to my biological father one day about how Jesus was a black man and all the disciples were black. And I thought that was interesting, you know. Now, later on, we're going to talk about transcending even that idea, but I think it's a good start.
Yeah, it's a good conversation to have. You know, because I'm noticing different people are at different degrees or levels. I don't really like saying that, but that's kind of true. Different degrees or levels of understanding, and that's one degree. That's one level. You know, understanding that the personage of Yeshua ben whatever Jesus the Christ, if in existence, was definitely a man of color, African man, at the very least, a brown-skinned man in the land. And definitely not this image that we have portrayed now, which is for a certain people, not for the world. You know, it's nothing wrong. You know, there's nothing wrong with portraying the divine essence in an image that looks like yourself. Cultures around the world do that. The problem becomes when you say this is the one definitive image that is the truth. That's the issue. So there are, and so, but you know, those are levels and degrees that need to be discussed and addressed, transcended, accepted, and moved beyond.
Exactly.
You know?
Because the thing is, you know, this is where we start to get in when I talk about transcending the idea of the historical Yeshua, right? Is to get yourself to identify with your own internal Christ consciousness or your Yeshua, the Yeshua of your being.
Right.
You know? So a lot of this was brought on as far as my thinking in this area was not just the things that I saw going on within the church, but also the fact that I'm looking at how there's this rebirth of consciousness among, you know, sisters and brothers who actually attend the churches, you know, and all the challenge towards racism, you know, from the angle of religion. We see that more and more, you know, these churches, they're saying that Christianity is actually an African religion. So at first glance, this appears, you know, it appears to be empowering. You know? And the thing about it is we've inherited like the book, like the King James Bible, but it's still colored with you know, ideas based on the perception of the ones who basically decided that they were going to do mass conversions against the will of the people that they converted.
Right.
So, you know, we look at the King James Bible, it's printed in 1611 AD, it has 66 books. And then we see that at one point in time, it was part of a larger canon of more than 70 books, you know, the Catholic Church. But due to a dispute with the Catholic Church, who themselves denied the validity of books like Enoch and other books, and, you know, that may be a canon of 88 books in, you know, the Ethiopian canon and so forth. It would appear that the mythos of Christ sent to save humanity was ancient by the time the religion of Christianity was even a small cult.
Agreed. That, you know, we really need to, when we engage brothers and sisters of the Christian faith, especially in the West, that point you brought up there, that the Ethiopian church has 88 books. You said 88 books?
Yes, that's correct.
88 books. The King James Version has 66. That makes a huge difference, because I know for a fact that the book of Enoch is extremely important in the Ethiopian church. And I know in the Syrian church and in the church that went over to China, the Gospel of Thomas is extremely important. I mean, they consider Thomas the one to have brought the gospel to Syria, to Persia, and to Asia. And then we all know, you and I know, and other brothers and sisters in the metaphysical sciences know, that the Gospel of Thomas is a metaphysical science.
Yes.
The Gospel of Thomas, if you read and study the Gospel of Thomas, then understanding comes across to you that you are the divine essence, that the divine essence is within you through cultivation. And this, when you look at the structure, when you look at the practices of Eastern Church, that's kind of what you get out of it. Like the Eastern Church has this concept of sharing not in God's essence, right? That sharing, they're saying sharing in God's essence is beyond your capacity, but not in God's energy. So we were talking about this earlier, through discipline, through meditation, through consistency, you're able to manifest God's energy within you. That's a revolutionary concept. You use God's energy to elicit healing to the brothers and sisters in your area. That's an Eastern Christian concept, and it's an African concept.
Yes.
In the Ethiopian church, they have George G.M. James in Stolen Legacy. What was the 3 levels that he said the Egyptian initiates went through? I know it was like the Sons of Light. What were those? Do you know those right offhand?
I would have say Neophyte, Adept, and Sons of Light, but it's been a while since I've actually practiced George G.M. James books. But yeah, we're talking about we definitely know that there's Neophytes. The Neophyte would be the first level, I believe. The next is the Adept, and then you become the Son of Light, which means that you have now reached immortality, or you identify with that which is permanent as opposed to that which is finite.
So check the way the Ethiopian church breaks it down, right? The Ethiopian, so we got Neophyte, right? George G.M. James, something along that level. George G.M. James says Neophyte. The Ethiopian church says purification is the first stage, right? And so we all know, so when you enter into the path of initiation in order to, manifest the divine essence, one of the first things that you're going to be taught is how to purify your consciousness, how to purify your temple, how to set your intentional awareness on your spiritual reality, And so essentially what's going to end up happening is your teacher, whoever they may be, will guide your life along a certain path. They'll tell you to start doing things in a certain manner. They're going to tell you to take up a certain amount of time in order to perform certain practices. There's going to be a certain dietary restriction that will purify the body. There's going to be a diet of the mind in which you are reading literature, which will purify the mind, purifying the body. And then there are going to be spiritual practices that you are going to engage in at certain degrees and certain levels, which is meant to not only, I don't want to say purify the spirit, because that's the wrong kind of term. The spirit is pure, but I want to say dispel illusions that you may have about life in general. When you enter into initiation, any teacher is going to give you something along those levels. They vary depending on tradition. That's the basic formula that it's going to take, right? And so that's going to be the neophyte purification stage, right? Because that's a struggle. You know what I'm saying? That struggle is going to be you debating, are you really going to live this life? Or are you going to live your old life which your family supports? Or in which your egoic nature supports? Because the ego never wants to die. Boom. I don't want to go into that. I'm going long. Then you got what they call adeptship. You said George G.M. James said adeptship. We can get clear on that later. And then they have what they call illumination. And essentially that's a stage in which you've transcended the old self, and you're manifesting within yourself the qualities of your path. You are becoming your path. At that point, though, you're just your path. You understand? Like, you're not yet, there's another level above that, but you've reached a certain degree, a certain level of transcendence and understanding where you understand principles inside your tradition well enough to pass them along to others as well. And then the third step, you said, was Sons of Light with George G.M. James. They call it deification. And it's both the same, identifying with the divine essence, in which you merge your consciousness into the consciousness of the one, And so those are the stages. And you have those coming from, you have that discussion happening around the world with mystics around the world without, that weren't connected with each other. And so that what we have then is we have these reports, we have these traditions that pass on this experience that can be experienced in real time by all people through discipline, dedication, ritual, and meditation. So that's really key. And then to understand that is in all traditions, and but excluded in the Roman Catholic kind of tradition is very key. And I think that will help our brothers and sisters that are inside the Christian tradition, to understand that they can manifest Christ consciousness within. And it's a known thing. It's not this, what do I want to say, mystery that people don't know about. It's a common thing, actually. It's pretty common around the world. It's not really a big mystery.
Yeah. And I think the whole idea originally of the mystery system was not so much for it to forever remain outside of our grasp, but to allow a person to take their personal journey, right? As they make the discoveries of who they are, because these things that they would encounter on throughout their journey, some of these things could not be described or understood by those who have not experienced them.
Hence, yeah, exactly. Even in what we're doing, what you and I are talking about now, if it goes beyond this and it reaches the larger audience, unless you're walking the path right now, you're not going to understand what we're talking about, because this is not something that, we can talk to people about it, but really we need to show people. This is a show and tell. Right. This is a true show me state of being. You understand? This is the show me state of being. And so you can only dispute this with your own experiential understanding. And by that, I mean, you go through your own initiation system. You meditate. If you refuse to meditate, if you refuse to engage in ritual, then we don't have much to talk about. Other than that, it's just going to be debating, information that has been written by man at certain dates, bringing up information in the physical world to correlate, collaborate, or conflict with other information that you find in other places. And it's cool at a certain point, but then at another point, you just have to become the information.
Yes, I agree.
Our ancestors became the information. They didn't spend their time arguing about the information.
Right, right. Because it's not something, you're going to forever be debating about it until you go and, experience it. So, like, for instance, I could tell you the ingredients that you put in the tea, but it's not really knowledge, it's information. But once you have tasted the tea, now you know what the tea tastes like. You've had an intimate relationship with the tea itself. So,
exactly.
So now you have the information of the ingredients, but your direct experience of the taste of the tea. Now you know what it tastes like, but you cannot describe that to someone who has never tasted that form of tea before. They may not even have any idea what tea actually tastes like until they sip it.
You not only know what it tastes like, you know what it does to you.
Mm-hmm.
You might have one of our teas, the Energizer tea. Right. We could describe what's in the Energizer tea. Yerba mate, we can talk about ginkgo biloba, we can talk about all that, right? We can discuss the different properties of it. But hey, if you're not going to drink tea, you're not going to understand the experience.
Exactly.
You're not going to understand the taste, and you're not going to understand the energy that it brings forth. And so we can argue, ad infinitum. That's not going to give you reality. That's not going to give you truth.
Exactly.
So I want to share a screen with you really fast, brother. And then get your thoughts on this matter. It's something that we know, Can you see my PowerPoint?
Let me see if I could
Do you see it?
okay, I see it says Urugu, an African-centered critique of European cultural thought and structure.
Right. So I was working on this. I think I told you I was working on setting up kind of like a book. It's basically going to be a book report. But I read this definition, and it goes along with what we were talking about before. So Urugu is a being in Dogon mythology responsible for disorder in the universe. Conceived in the denial of the natural order, it acts to initiate and promote disharmony in the universe. In African cosmology, such a being is deficient in spiritual sensibility and perpetually in conflict, and limited cognitively, and is threatening to the well-being of humanity. We were literally just discussing someone that's like this in our community right now. Mm-hmm. And these are brothers and sisters that deny spiritual reality and are in perpetual conflict, seeking conflict. And this conflict is threatening to the well-being of the community. Mm-hmm. Because we see brothers and sisters that are engaged in this level of being, because by not embracing their spiritual nature, they're allowing the lower intellectual nature to run amok.
Yes.
And yes. It's not healthy whatsoever at all.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, because
I'm gonna take it off the share now. I'm gonna take it off the share. Is that cool?
Sure.
I'm listening now, brother.
In the Gnostics text, in fact, I've recently been looking into a work called the Pistis Sophia, and this is the work that comes out of Alexandria. It was from the Gnostic Christians, who also, they recognize Christ, the spiritual aspect, and the divine, the physical aspect and the divine aspect. However, they mention one becoming Christ-like by reaching this level beyond what they call the self-willed one. Now, the self-willed one, that is said to be the disobedient one, the one who became disobedient, decided that that it would go against harmony, against allowing the Sophia, the wisdom, to transcend, to go to the higher realms, or back to the highest realm, which is the 13th stage, or aeon. And what it was is, it speaks about all these aspects being triune in nature: the first Trinity, the second Trinity, and the third Trinity. The first Trinity, I'm sure that you're familiar with the Tree of Life, but for those who are not familiar with the Tree of Life, it deals with those first three spheres at the bottom, right? Coming up from the physical plane, which in Hebrew they call Machut. Then you go further up and you see that there's sphere 9, sphere 7, and sphere 8, or sphere 9, sphere 8, sphere 7.
I keep looking back because I got it on my screen behind me. I'm trying to see if you can see it. I'm going to bring this thing closer as you keep talking.
Okay. So what that deals with is the faculties of being able to utilize, the ability to like sex, desire, the intellect, and so forth. The problem is that a lot of people are stuck at those three spheres. Okay, so yes, I see it. So we have sphere 9, which is called Yesod, right? That means foundation. Then you have Had, which is splendor. You have Nitzak, and my Hebrew, I'm a little bit old as far as the Hebrew, so I got to get that back. But basically, Nitzak is dealing with also the Venetian energy that's dealing with the imagination, as well as the life force. Then you got Had, which is on the left, that's dealing with the intellect. And then you got Yesod, that's dealing with the memory, but it's also dealing with the genitalia. So a lot of people are influenced, and they are stuck in those lower three spheres. And they are stuck in the consciousness of the self-willed one. In other words, they, like Ron Ephraim's work, they're in the level of the Sahu man or Sahu person.
I want to discuss this concept you just said, self-willed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I made I made a video the other day talking about what it means to be attuned, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was talking. The video is called "The Light in the Mist,"
Yeah.
and so it was basically talking about how the divine essence is within you, it has a
Mm-hmm.
light, so to speak, consciousness, right? And
Right.
its expression is is clouded by this mist of ego, this mist of emotion, this mist of thought of self, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then it's the clearing away of this mist which allows for the expression of this light within you. But this light is connected to the divine essence. And once the light once you're connected with that light, it's as if though your will and the divine essence's will becomes one.
Yeah.
But it seems as if though, listening to what you're saying, when you say self-willed one, that self, it would be that person that identifies their consciousness with these lower aspects of being, and
Mm-hmm.
then taking that along with the 10th sphere, which in the according to the Medu Neter with Shechem or Shechem, is the body, Geb, earth, manifested reality. Taking that to be the totality of reality, and not understanding their connection with that light, and then not relinquishing their egoic will to the divine will. That's kind of what I'm gathering by the self-willed one.
Right. Right. And if you notice, they're still connected to the 10th sphere, which means that they're still influenced by the sensation of being in matter. You know,
Exactly.
so, and the thing about it is that we often are trying to use our personal will, but in order for our personal will to go the distance, you have to transform the stories that are in the back of your subconscious that have you repeating the same patterns over and over and over again. It's like a computer virus. What it is that your computer is moving slow and it's about to crash because of all this buildup and information running in the background of the actual screen that you may have up now, but it's because of a virus where it was not able to get rid of all the other programs that are continuing to run. So you have to go, like you mentioned earlier, the purification. That ritual often takes place in the form of baptism, where it's communicating to the spirit that their sins and their old self is being washed away. And you also go through a certain level of trance when you're going through these rituals. So when you go through these trance states, you're able to go within, and if you're able to visualize and picture other stories along with chants and sound vibrations and allowing all this gunk to come from your inner being, right? You're able to flush it out, and then you're on your way to becoming a new person. So these particular rituals often involved meditation and fasting and so forth, as you had mentioned before.
Yeah.
Now, interestingly enough, in the Pista Sophia, I'm trying to, I believe that this is a metaphor because it talks about 11 years after Christ's resurrection. Where if you look at the spheres of the tree of life, there are 10, and then there's also a hidden one, which is the Ath, right? Also, you can look at the idea of what they call the Insuf or Insuf Ur, which would be above sphere 10. Mm-hmm. Now, they don't really show it in this particular diagram, but if you get into like
Oh,
certain
you mean
forms,
right here?
yeah, there's actually an aspect beyond Kether or that sphere of Asar that would be in sphere 1.
That's top. This would be Malkuth.
Yes,
Oh, so you're talking, okay. Right,
so
no doubt. Yeah.
okay, so you have that aspect where you're dealing with pure consciousness, but when you get into the tree of life, what you want to do is you want to activate the tree and light the tree up, because in the Hebrew tradition they call the tree also the aspect of the blueprint of one being able to navigate themselves through self and through the universe as well, because we are the microcosm of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
It has been lit up or has been light. Once you light the tree up, and all 10 spheres are illuminated, that means that one is now filled with the Christ consciousness, or they are experiencing the level which in Gnosticism is known as pleroma, which means the
Yeah.
fullness of one's being. When the fullness of one's being is in harmony with the fullness of the faculties of the universe, then that means one has become liberated and we have returned to our state of being as a being of light.
I want to share kind of a personal experience with you. So when my wife and I, when we attend, when we're in the city and we go to our community's gatherings, we know, and then versus when we go to the monastery
Mm-hmm.
and we experience life there, we notice this big difference here. Like in the when we're in the city and we go to our gatherings in the city, we notice that the focus is not so much on the higher spheres of the tree of life as much as trying to manifest all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to understand how to live a Matian balanced life while still dealing with our set, while still dealing with Sevek, while still dealing with Het Heru, right? Especially Het Heru. Anyway, and then the sixth sphere and the Ma'at and the Herukti and Seker, still, well, mostly they're still dealing in the world, right? And still giving expression to all of those lower spheres, they're still giving expression to the lower three chakras, the first chakra of trying to figure out, your basic needs, the second chakra of interpersonal relationships and how you connect with other people on an interpersonal level, and the third chakra of manifesting your own like personal will. So these are things that we notice happen in the city. In the monastery, and then living in the monastic retreat, there's only one expression, and that's the expression of the higher spheres. Like there's no talking. It's discipline, meditation, eating once a day, and meditating and working, and that's it. There's no room for the expression of the ego, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the ego doesn't get expressed, but what does get expressed is attunement to the divine at all times. And so then you're constantly being engaged in that environment, kind of like, well, all you're doing is thinking about and manifesting that energy at all times. And so we've noticed that being a big difference, between being in the city versus being in the monastery. And then when you come back to the city, there's been a lot of growth as a result of being away at a retreat. So that's one thing we've noticed, it makes a big difference. And so when you're constantly vibrating on those higher spheres, the energies of the lower spheres are still there, but they're not as strong.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's that vibration on the higher spheres that kind of takes you into dealing with the energy that you have already to deal with. That's a direct experience notice,
Mm-hmm.
and then, so yeah, I just wanted to share that with you, brother, on that level.
A lot of times along the way of our personal path of initiation, we'll experience things that remind us of who and what we actually are.
Yeah.
Now, when you go to these places like the monastery, for example, right? Or you go to a retreat where you are around nature, you're also away from all the influences that you find in the city, which is commerce oriented.
Yep.
You're not picking up on these subliminal messages to get you to buy stuff, right?
Yeah. No.
And you know, you're not hearing the arguments of your neighbor down the street because subconsciously you're picking up on all these things go what they call 40 clicks below your conscious hearing range. You're still picking up on these things subconsciously. You're picking up on all the commercials that's being played by your next door neighbor, even if you yourself are not watching TV. So,
not only subconsciously, vibrationally with your being too. Agreed subconsciously, but you feel it. You feel these vibrations. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
And this too. As you meditate and as you engage in different spiritual practice, you become more sensitive to
yeah.
the vibrations around you. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying? So you're exactly right.
So, as time goes on, when you get sensitive to these things, when you go out, like for instance, a lot of times I have to go out in nature. I might go by the water and meditate by the water where they have the negative ions, because in the city you're around a whole bunch of positive ions. And that is what makes people feel tired and everything else, because everything is sucking these negative ions up. So you're going to go where there's nature, where there's water, where there's plants and trees, where there's not as much pollution and so forth. And then you can actually communicate with nature. You can get next to the tree and feel the vibrations coming from the tree. And, when you're in tune enough, you'll know exactly which tree to go to that have the healing properties that you need if you're trying to eliminate certain impurities on an energetic level from your being, or even sickness.
Maladome Some in his book, Like Water for Spirit, he talks about an initiation he went through when he was younger, where I think it was an elder sent him into the woods and told him to stay there until he saw a being come out of a tree, right?
Yes.
All right. So the first time I was in the monastery, I was sent into the woods to cut wood. And then, me just being whatever, I sat down on a log for hours and was looking at a tree, like waiting for somebody to come out. Mm. I think I might only stayed there like an hour and a half, 2 hours. Like, man, I ain't seen nothing. I'm out. So nothing, but that wasn't the initiation for me. You know what I'm saying? Like somebody else's initiation is not necessarily yours, so the initiation was actually just being in nature, and just, being in those vibrations. That was Maladome Soma's joint, not mine. You know what I'm saying? So, I experienced and had what I needed to get me to where I need to be to actually do this in this moment. And that's the way that goes. But this is the importance of these conversations, because we understand the limited nature of the dogmatic understanding of religion, the literal interpretation of religion, and the false narrative that all you have to do is sit here and listen to somebody talk to you and then take their word for it. Because what we're talking about is how, and we're not even talking like esoteric metaphysical sciences. Like you're telling brothers and sisters to go out into nature and sit and meditate in nature. We're both telling people to sit and to meditate. You know what I'm saying? We have literally given out some serious techniques of transformation just in this conversation alone, if somebody could really hear what we're talking about. Really adhere and hear what we're talking about. So I think, that's the difference in this conversation. Like it's not even really about this what am I trying to say? It's not about dismantling a person's religious beliefs. It's about showing how to manifest energy and balance within your belief.
Exactly. Yeah, because right now, a lot of people are at this woke stage, but what comes with it is this debunking attitude,
Yeah, it's like the young stages of understanding, like it's a young baby stage. It's literally a baby stage, that needs to be transcended. Because, in the West, you do have this concept of people getting together, making religion. In other areas, these are actual techniques of transcendence and transformation. So,
yes. And I wanted to let's just take a look at the most popular views that we have of religion. Like most of today's religions, they started out as initiatory spiritual cultivation systems. Unfortunately, due to time and corruption, like you had a stage where there were power hungry monarchs, priests, politicians, and whatever. But the tradition after a while becomes corrupt. It becomes a system of control. So much of the popular forms of our religion today is a method of keeping people in a narrow-minded disposition. So having a fear of knowledge, many of its practitioners continue to have faith in a power that they believe to be outside of themselves. Now, the mystical idea, as we as individuals, is that you're reaching perfection. So when you get into the church, the idea of that is through Christ, accepting Christ, right? Empty ourselves of ourselves so we may be filled with the Holy Spirit.
Right.
Our minds are renewed and we become transformed and guided to do the work of God, right? Interestingly enough, many people who practice the actual religion in the West, they seem to miss the idea that the goal of the Christian is to become filled with the Holy Spirit. One of these necessary steps is through the rite of purification that you mentioned earlier, that they call baptism, being immersed in water. So, so we look at the Christ, and we talked about this a little bit earlier. Being the Son of God, sent to humanity as a sacrifice and a gift that would guarantee salvation for the individual to enter the higher realms in which they call heaven. Now, this is, of course, reserved, for the believers who accept that Christ cometh in the flesh. Yeah. This is according to the teachings of Pauline Christianity.
Okay.
So the problem is not so much in believing that Christ cometh in the flesh. The problem is that the belief that the adherents of the doctrine have taken on is that it takes place outside of themselves. So the true intention behind the mystery of Christ is for people to recognize that we're reaching perfection and you will become perfected in Christ, which means anointed. So you're talking about an internal anointing of consciousness. And by emptying of what we believe ourselves to be, the person, the ego, we become filled with the Holy Spirit, which in Hebrew is Ruach HaKodesh, the breath or divine breath of God.
When you talk about, Pentecostals are into this, like being filled with the Holy Spirit and manifesting like spiritual awareness. You're like totally on camera right here, Alceta.
Hey.
We all see you at the bottom there, sister.
Oh no, I just wanted to listen in.
Do you want to participate? You can do your phone and you can have your own screen, or do you want to sit here?
Oh, no, that's fine.
Which one do you want to do?
I'll do the screen. I'll do on the phone.
I can see. Yeah, I see you behind the. We see you behind the chart.
We see you under here.
Oh.
So, or do you have your computer? Does it link to the net?
My phone, I actually have. Is it on Zoom?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have it on your phone?
Yeah.
All right, let me go ahead and send this to you then. Hold a second. But peace, brother. Go ahead, keep speaking. I gotta send the sister this the ID and everything.
I see. So, when I look at the book like the Bible, right? The Holy Bible, Helios Biblius in Latin or in Greek, and Helia Biblia in Greek in Latin. We'll notice that those two words actually mean the sun book. Because what we're doing is we're activating our own solar life force energy. The Bible can actually be utilized as a book of initiation if you know what to look for.
Okay.
So there's a lot of sweetness in the gum of Christianity. It hasn't all been chewed out just yet. But unfortunately, what's been going on is people have been being manipulated to give their money away to somebody, as opposed to cultivating the spirit within themselves. But it's not to say that there hasn't been peeps and aspects of the mystical tradition rearing up. Like, for instance, you mentioned like the Baptists and the Pentecostal. If we look at the way the Baptist and Pentecostal churches behave, we'll see that they have a lot of Africanisms in these churches.
100% Africanisms, brother. Sister, are you still there?
Yes, I'm logging
in. Okay. Actually, here's the code right here. I sent it to you. Yeah, brother. When I was doing some research on the Pentecostal church, it was started by a European brother. I forget his name. I don't really know the African brother's name either, but it was brought alive by the African brother going to some street in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. And this whole speaking in tongues, being anointed by the Spirit, these are all African traditions that found their way into the Pentecostal faith.
Yeah.
You know, and it deals with actually manifesting the energy. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's a form of personal understanding of how the divine essence manifests within the self. So it's totally different. You know, honestly, I don't know what the average Christian believes. I'm lost. I honestly I can't, and I think that's why I run into some confusion
Mm-hmm.
because I just don't know. There's a sister coming on right here with no video. What's up with that? You trying to hide?
No, I was trying to actually.
See, no, nobody can hear you. I can hear you because you're in the house, but nobody online can hear you.
All right, hold on. Just continue. I'm just figuring this out.
All right. See, people be trying to hide. They be like afraid to show. I'm just playing. Anyway, this is a good sister. She's been building for a while. She'll come on. She has her own unique perspective on things as well. So, Brother Kepra, you're not aware of her. I know her very well. Her name's Aseta Sa'ak. And so she's interested in joining us in these sessions.
Well, I definitely would welcome her, and I'm always down to welcome another perspective.
Yeah, she's definitely got a unique perspective. The sister, I'll let her share her story in her way.
Nice.
All right.
Now, is she able to come? Is she able to come in?
Can you hear me? Yes, I
hear
can hear
you.
myself.
Okay, so I don't see you, but I do hear you.
All right, hold on one second.
James?
Yes, I'm
James.
here.
You know, you might want to go in the other room. Maybe it'll be better.
Okay.
But we still can't see you.
Let's see.
You know, there's a button for video on the phone if you just tap the screen and allow the other
Oh, that's why. Okay.
yeah, tap the screen and allow the other functions to appear. Yo. Peace.
Peace.
Everyone.
All right. Man, we are so much in the future. This is crazy. Anyway, whatever. I'm so blown away by tech. So, all right, sister, we're online, and we're talking about how we're not debunking any religion. We're talking about how the divine essence can be found within all traditions.
Okay.
And that a more beneficial conversation to have with people is to show them how the divine essence can be found in all religions or in all systems of cultivation. So that's the conversation we're having. Feel free to chime in or, you know, make it, well, I guess introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay.
And then, you know, feel free to talk, chime in on whatever it is that we're talking about.
Okay, well, first of all, my name is Jamie, Osetas Uncle Sarah. I am originally from Connecticut. I was born and raised in Christian backgrounds, Christian family. My father is a pastor of about 17, 18 years. My mother is a minister. They went to theology school together. So yeah, when I moved here in 2015, I found myself, you know, looking for churches. It was one of those things where, you know, my mom would always ask me, did you join the church yet? Did you join the church? And I said, I haven't, because I was really just looking for one that God leads me to, and not just, you know, going to church just to be saying I'm going to church. To me, it's Christianity and just my own relationship with God has been something that if it's not something that's sincere, I don't feel as though I'm being true to my faith. And so when I moved here and I, you know, ended up finding a church after, you know, going from church to church, about, I don't know, maybe 10 churches. Out of 10 churches, it was one. I was going to that church for about 2 years. And in 2017, I was moving my way out of the church and really connecting with, you know, the people in the community, because I noticed that there there was a sincerity and a true intention that I found in others when looking back at, you know, the atmosphere that I came from, never being the type of person that I could be with the cliques in the churches. So connecting with people who may not have necessarily had the routine as me, going to church every Sunday, I started to allow the openness to things that were outside of what I was taught all my life for the most part. Mm-hmm. And so eventually it led me here. Since then, my relationship with God, with the Supreme Source, has become so overwhelmingly just an experience that I just can't, words can't express it. It's to the point I'm very aware that I'm still traveling through time and through this journey and seeing, you know, what God continues to unfold in my life, but just where it is. And when I go back home, they're like, oh my gosh, you turned your back on God, because, you know, they don't hear me speaking the way I used to. And I find myself stepping more and more away from every religion that man has tried to put limitations on, because God is so in every room and in no room at the same time. So I'm the love and just feeling that overwhelming experience, or experiencing that overwhelming experience of just living and having that life source in your life, and just taking you places where you're able to connect with anyone who doesn't necessarily look like you in the physical, but just knowing that the God in me is connecting with the God in them.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I just went like all.
It's all good. It's all good. This is you know, this is really just kind of a conversation the brother and I are having. You're engaged. Blessings. Thank you for sharing that with us. Definitely appreciate it. I guess one question we both would have for you is like, what challenges what are some of the more common questions that you come across in reference to like growing spiritually, developing spiritually, and Christian church dogma and doctrine? You know, like Christian understanding on what is possible in life. Because engaging in spirituality, you know, it involves a lot of different things. And so it especially involves a lot of different energy work. And so how do you discuss and describe working with energy to the common Christian brother or sister who really thinks yoga is of the devil? I see a smile, so you feel me, right?
Yeah, because I've experienced both. So of course, you know, in 2012, I was doing yoga for 2 years. I did Bikram. And my friend who put me on, like, I wasn't doing yoga at all, but it wasn't until my friend introduced it to me. Her background, her mother's Chinese and her father's Haitian, and her mother's Catholic. And this individual was someone who just wanted to experience God in the Christian church. So we found each other in a restaurant, and we established a very close relationship. And then eventually, while we were going to church together, she then had it where she was doing Bikram yoga. And so I got involved with her. She was like, oh, you should come to class with me. And so I went to the class, and it was something about that one class that had me going back. And it obviously wasn't the heat of the room or the positions, because they're hard. As you know, Bikram is very challenging with the person. But just doing and getting established, or going deeper, you know, into my practice with Bikram, and, you know, she's someone who I'm experiencing that with. And then came a point where this person that opened the gateway for me to get to yoga. I opened up a gateway for her to get into the church, and she then turned on me.
What?
And said, what you're doing is demonic, because of the same person who just recently, a couple of months ago, or last month, has been sending me videos on how yoga's demonic, not even asking me about my experience, just cold turkey shutting it down without knowing what it is.
Yoga is demonic. I was kind of joking.
Yeah, no, it's been, matter of fact, it's been the last 5 months coming back to me. But 5 years ago, this is why I stopped doing yoga, because I couldn't take my family and my friends all in my ears telling me how this is demonic. It's talking about emptying out your mind. You'll be saying that you are God, I am divine, or I am light. And all of those things I didn't understand. And now that I'm in it and I'm reading, the passages and, just the sutras that they're reading from, there's nowhere where it says I am the divine source. I am not the creator. It's my life has been surrendered to the one who creates all. It is a lot to know. It's a lot for some people to just discover something for themselves, but instead they jump on the bandwagon when one person who's very influential says this is good or this is bad, then all the other sheep, they listen without actually doing the research themselves. And so that was one thing. I ended up coming to a place where I have confidence in what it is that I do. I know that for sure that this was a place that God brought me to, because even in my experience, my body, that I had been going through what people thought could have been a disease later on in my life, I have been supernaturally healed of that. I'm able to address past situations in my life where I was blaming the other person, and I'm now in a place where I'm able to go back into that space and see where I had, some shortcomings or setbacks that I could have improved in myself so that I wouldn't have to experience that same cycle all over. And in that moment, I'm healing. Having a peace of mind, not having this impulsive way or this imbalance where I'm responding to things as if I'm angry, or as if I don't have peace, or as if I'm not someone who's rational, who can actually take the time to understand why something is happening.
Now, I wanted to touch up on something you just said. I wanted to connect it with what you were talking about, Brother Kepler. You understand? So she just said that she's been reading sutras that have talked about how it's not that so much that she's the creator, but surrendering her will over to the one that created. And didn't we just talk about the self-willed one earlier in Gnostic texts?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
That was it. I was kind of passing it to you.
But you see, this is how we know that everything aligns at the time that it's supposed to. Now, mind if I call you Sister Jamie, or do you have another name?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Something I noticed about what you had mentioned, and that is when you started to take responsibility for the situation that you was in, that's when your healing began. I'd like to share something with you, a personal experience I had. Years ago, I was in the military over a decade ago, and I was very angry at everybody. I was angry at all the commanding officers. I was angry at the fact that I was fighting for a cause in which I did not believe in, even though I myself signed the paper and agreed to be a part of that. I was angry with my father. I was angry with my mother. And when I got back from Iraq, I was drinking like a fish out of water. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I noticed I'd have these heart palpitations. Now my diet wasn't all that good either. So now remember, I'd already been exposed to these spiritual systems long before I joined the military, but I decided that I was going to take a different route, just to backtrack a little bit. But anyway, I digress. One day, I was on the bus, right? Because I went to the VA, to try to get all my benefits in order. And I noticed my heart was palpitating very, very noticeably, to the point that I thought I was going to keel over and die. So I tried Reiki and everything else, and I still felt the palpitations. You know, I tried slowing down the breath. I still felt the palpitations. So I kind of went into self and asked, well, what is the problem? Because by that time, to make a long story short, I'd stopped drinking. I'd stopped eating Swanson's TV dinner. I was working on my health and everything else, but the palpitations would not go away. Okay. So I was like, well, sheesh, could this horrible diet still be affecting me all the way up until now? And I went into self, and a voice came from within and said, you need to forgive. And I went over every single person that I was angry with, all the way down to my childhood. And I said, I forgive you. I release you. After I was done with that, I was never, ever subjugated to another heart palpitation. This was over 10 years ago. I haven't had a heart palpitation since.
I believe you.
So, see,
that is amazing.
In Chinese medicine, an overactive mind is connected with the heart. And so as you were talking, I was seeing what they would call problems of the shin, or the spirit. And Chinese medicine says the spirit is in the heart, the mind is in the heart, which also, as I was learning that in class, I definitely related that to the ancient Kemetic scene of weighing the heart.
Yes.
Whereas they weigh your heart, which is the seat of the soul, the mind and the consciousness, because it is from the heart where the desires come out and which leads your life. It's not necessarily the mind, and the heart has on it the desires for life, the desires to experience life, and the desires to experience the divine are the carnal part of life. So yeah, that's kind of what I see there.
Yes. So, as you can see, I literally had to empty out the heart. I had to make the heart lighter, And from time to time, I still go through what I call a forgiveness ritual, where I'm releasing, because I know I'm not forgiving because of them. I'm forgiving for myself so that I can move on. Because if I still remain attached to anger towards people, it will turn into what it turned into 10 years ago. Sometimes in my readings, someone might come to me and they may have an ailment. And I recall a brother who was senior to me, and another brother had read him along with me, and we saw what his problem was. And his problem is that he had this tumor in his head, but it was linked to a lack of forgiveness towards his father. So we asked him, how do you feel about your father? And he revealed that he was angry at his father all the way up until his middle age. So we had told him that it would help him if he forgives his father, because all this time he was carrying on his anger towards his father, but it was also affecting him. And another thing too that you mentioned, sisters, is is taking responsibility. Because when you put the power in somebody else's hand by refusing to take responsibility, you're literally giving your ability to heal and your power away to somebody else.
That's the whole early history of the church. And see, that's where it comes from, because the church, you had mentioned something earlier. I gave you the notebook. But in that notebook, actually, you'll notice in my notes, I have Pope. The Roman Catholic Pope is one, right? In the West. In the East, they have a council of popes. And see, that was another schism that they had. Like, the Roman Catholic Pope wanted power, and in the East, they were able to share power. In the West, this also relates to the Roman Catholic Pope being the one vicar of Christ, and being the power through which Christ manifests on earth, through that one being. And then that Pope's power then translating down to his bishops and his priests, and then to the lay people. And then the lay people needing to go to the priest in order to be absolved of their sins. So the Catholic Church having the power over your soul. This is the power that Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation was trying to break free of. And so, but this is the power that the Eastern Church was denying and rejecting, because it actually went against the gospel of St. Thomas and Enoch, which discusses you become the divine essence. So we start to see where these schisms in the Christian church come from. When you look at spiritual growth and development versus historical Roman Catholic Christianity, and then we look at its derivations that happened after the Martin Luther Reformation. So, I mean, it becomes important to have these discussions and these conversations, not so much to debunk Christianity, not to ask whether or not Christianity is the white man's religion. That's kind of a moot point. What is of more importance is the effectiveness of a tool to help you manifest divine consciousness within, and then how to decode and reach within that tool to manifest that light. Because ultimately, the divine essence needs expression, wants expression on the planet in order to help bring more balance, more peace, more healing to this world. And I think that's the work that these conversations will be engaged in, and hopefully, if I can get past the 21 views on YouTube and reach the thousands that I hope, hopefully this is the message that we bring forth, because there's not a lot of brothers and sisters bringing forth these messages. I mean, we can engage in the discussions and debunking the historical basis of certain religions, and that has its function. But what is of more benefit is if we can help more and more people heal, become healers, and then manifest the divine essence within. Go on a deep search on your own tradition. The deeper and harder you search inside Christianity, the faster you become a mystic, because the further you go back, the more mystical you become. And then once you start to just really see that these people created this perspective and these other people accepted this perspective, then you can see the mythology being formed. And it's easier to see the history versus the mystery, and then decide upon which mystery you would like to adhere to. I'm not saying don't adhere. We're saying adhere with consciousness.
Right.
Right. And then we're also saying, at the same time, take responsibility for your spiritual development. And that means when you take responsibility, you had mentioned escapism at some point in one of our conversations. I don't know if it was this one or our previous one, but if we look at the tree of life, right? If we take it from a tree of life or a chakra development perspective, right? The first thing you do in spiritual development is you take responsibility for the energies going within you and the energies around you, right? So you protect your personal environmental space, right? So on a personal level, you're not going to let people involved in your space that are inimical to your spiritual growth and development, right? You're not going to take in crack. You're not going to drink a lot of liquor. You're not going to smoke weed. You're not going to do this. As you purify and you attune yourself to the vibrations, right? You're not going to allow people to come into your space that's causing chaos and drama, right? You're not going to allow yourself to be hurt. You're not going to allow yourself to be taken advantage of. You're going to control how you manifest in the world, right? So that's what you're going to do personally. So if we look at that on a group level, we're going to control our physical space. We're going to control how we eat. We're going to control our food resources. We're going to control the people in our community that police our community, because they have the power to inflict safety or harm. Right. So spirituality is not so much about escapism as it is about controlling our constructing an environment that is conducive to spiritual growth. And the more powerful, the more influential you are and your movement is, the more ability it will have to construct an environment for the most amount of people. So eventually, yes, you do get off into politics, into controlling aspects of your community in order to help support your spiritual growth and development. You know, so the community's policies and practices supports the spiritual growth and development of the individual. So it's not so much about the individual escaping from society, but it's about the individual helping to mold society in such a way that is conducive for the spiritual growth and development of the members. You know, but then again, that requires a lot of talking, a lot of debating, a lot of work, and so on and so forth. And you need people that are willing to do that. Most people aren't. So we just rather just say, hey, deuces.
I'm going to make a differentiation between this spiritual cultivation and escapism. You know, that, you know, you need to make a differentiation between that. Like, for instance, you mentioned the environment, you know, so we look at your background, we see that you have the colors, you have the purple, you have the lavender, and you're actually wearing the purple, which indicates that there is a certain frequency that you're attuning to. You have all the symbols that represent healing in the room around you. So this means that you are working in creating that environment and attuning yourself to a certain frequency. In Kabbalistic tradition and Hermetic traditions, there's a form of path working as well, because you want to create an environment around you that's going to affect your inner being, and then your inner being is a reflection, and vice versa, reflection from the internal as well as the external. You want those two things to reflect each other.
Yeah.
So a lot of times when we do these rituals, it's not so much that they're dead rituals, if you understand that you're trying to leave an impression on your spirit. But the fact that the spirit, the way to communicate through the spirit is through symbolism and gestures and other means. I wanted to talk about something, you know, that kind of relates to something we had mentioned earlier. And that is in the book of John, right? When you first read the book of John, it talks about in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, and the Word was made flesh, right? And we had talked about this Greek meaning of the word, you know, for a lot of people translate it to mean word, but it's logos.
Logos.
Mm-hmm. So, and there's also another word, another meaning for the word logos, which actually translates into ratio. You know. Why? Because the logos was the symbol of divine harmony as well as math and proportion. So the Christ being identified as the logos represents the divine idea of perfection and harmony with nature that can be awakened within us. So the Adamic man, male and female, represents one who is perfect, or should I say imperfect, in the fact that there is still a lot to learn. Even though Adam would eventually fall, Adam still needed to go to the experience of duality. So therefore, he, along with his wife, partakes of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which deals with male, female, dichotomies of yin and yang, and so forth. So you experience extreme temperatures, extreme hot, extreme cold. And because of you experiencing these extremes, you suffer. So they still made him in the image and likeness of God. This is important. So Jesus Christ in the Christian Bible is referred to as the second Adam, who represents one who is reborn, but this time in a state of perfection. So perfection in accordance with divine person represent one who is functioning in connection of universal principles in the form of the universal logos. So the idea of the logos, it seems to have been stressed by both Pythagoras and Plato.
Mm-hmm.
But both men have been initiated in the ancient African tradition of Kemet. So the idea of the logos, which remain within the teachings of Christianity, is to understand that the name of Christ represents this divine proportion. So in other words, divine vibration, which is called upon to activate the Christ principle within ourselves. And this goes back to the whole idea of the king who dies and resurrects. Now, we of course know that that is a star or Osiris. And in African traditions, there's the Dogon that talk about a fish. Now, you know the symbol of Christ in the age of Pisces is a fish. And if you look on the back of cars, sometimes you see Jesus written within the fish. Interesting enough, the Dogon
Is that right?
of Mali, huh?
Oh, the sister is just like really shaking her head. So
Because I heard this. This is so. It took me a while, and now I mean, lately I've been resonating with it more and more.
Mm-hmm. Well, where I was going with that is the Dogon of Mali. They have a story, and you had mentioned Urugu earlier. And before Urugu was also Ogo, who was known as the pale fox or the jackal, who in the beginning of creation stole a piece of his own placenta after the creator decided that he was going to try to make love to the earth. So this created an imbalance. This created a disharmony. So the only way that that disharmony could be brought back into balance is Ama had to send Nomo in the form of a fish. And this fish being sacrificed himself and allowed his flesh to be eaten and his bones thrown into the water, where 3 days later he is resurrected to bring and reestablish order back into the universe. Same story, just told in a different way.
True. Everybody, we got about maybe 8 more minutes, then we gotta go. But I wanted to say this when you were talking about. So, don't they say who was it, Paul wrote John? Aren't they saying that? Who was the author of John?
I want to say, I'm not going to say Paul just yet, but I do know that Paul wrote a lot of letters to the Romans, but it is said that Paul at one point in time could have been a Gnostic himself.
Right, but well, this is what I was going to say. I know that apologetics is it's as old as the Christian tradition itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you are describing in early Christianity would be considered like a Gnostic type of understanding, you know? But what many people say Paul did was he took their Christian understanding, I mean, their Aristotelian Platonic understanding of logos and flipped it over into saying this is what Christ has always been. Mm-hmm. So he took their Greek understanding of philosophy and just said, well, what you've always worshipped has Christ, has the logos, has Christ all along. You know, and I've seen that as like an aggressive attack, you know, trying to say, you know, and this is what, in the debate that Brother Jabari had with Vince Bantu, this is what Bantu was saying, but you know, that what you are doing inside the sweat lodge is worshiping Christ. Mm-hmm. You know, coming over and totally like taking the tradition, calling it a Christian tradition and dismissing your culture. This is why earlier I brought up the conversation on like, when you accept Christianity, you necessarily also accept the cultural, historical mythology of the Jews as well, because they're intricately linked. Uh-huh. And so then by doing that, you deny the cultural historical value or the cultural historical mythological tradition that you came from. Mm-hmm. And then you're associating, you know, the world with the creation stories of the Jews. And we discussed how the Jews themselves mixed in their philosophy with Babylonian philosophy because they didn't start writing till they came into Babylonian captivity. Mm-hmm. And so that's the confusing part of Christianity that needs to be addressed. You know, That's why Marcion and a lot of the different heresies also needs to be looked at, because the Jews have a completely different view on how you need to deal with people than the Christians.
Oh, yeah.
The Jews will whip your butt if you come off wrong. Uh-huh. Christians will give you their other butt to whip. So it's a whole different joint, you know. So I mean, that has to be explored. I'm reading a book now, where I mean, it's a conspiracy book. I'm trying to see if there's any validity to it, because we know that the Jewish wars were like really heavy around the time of the creation of Christianity, and that the Romans were in charge, and that Eris Piso, have you heard of this brother?
Yes.
This mythological figure. They're talking about he's the one who created Christianity, took the traditions of the Caesars and translated them into the stories of Jesus. You know, that's why you have all of these different, you know, the actual Bible, the actual, you know, Gospels being written at these extremely late dates, because they've taken different stories of different Roman emperors and transcribed them onto the Jesus myth and so on.
Yeah.
So I don't know about the validity of that. I just know that that's something being talked about.
What it is that the Piso family, they basically became power behind the Romanized mythos of the Christ. And what they wanted to do is they wanted people to worship them as the Christ figure collectively. See, so that they can have political power and control. The whole reason why Christianity is in the form it is today has a lot to do with people wanting to have political power. So, you know, the Roman Empire had this concept of vox populi, which is popular opinion. They had to have a way of influencing popular opinion. And one of the things they did was they would dumb everybody down, you see. But it's also led to their downfall, because as they grew their empire, they began to spread themselves out too thin. This, you know, eventually led to their destruction at the hands of the Anglo-Saxons and whatnot. And also the fact that they were wearing down from within, and their empire became too separated. So that broke into factions. But I wanted to get into the idea of the concept of gnosis. Now, you had mentioned the book of Thomas, or that is the Gospel of Thomas. We look at gnosis, that's been translated into knowledge, but not so much an intellectual idea, but a knowledge of dealing with the direct experience with the divine and universal knowing. Many of the early Christian communities that developed in Egypt, like throughout the Coptic concepts and the Gnosis, the Gnostics, they had this idea that you would experience divinity through accumulating knowledge, but not just intellectual knowledge. The striving was for direct experience. So when you read the Nag Hammadi text that was found in Upper Egypt in the year 1945, it talks about transcending matter and returning to our original state as a light being. So this involves being filled with the spirit, which they call the process of pleroma. And the pleroma is the fullness of cosmic consciousness, when all of our divine faculties have been awakened and are one with the faculties of God, like I mentioned earlier. But gnosis was also looked upon as the key to salvation. Later on, it was the rise of the Catholic Church. The focus became through grace, through the belief in Jesus, as opposed to knowledge via direct experience. So the Mother Church of Rome eventually would suppress many of the teachings that had anything to do with direct experience with God and focus on the individual as a sinner. So,
it's about to cut us. Why don't we discuss metaphysical esoteric texts next time?
Okay.
All right, we got less than a minute, so brothers and sisters, peace. Blessings until next time.